Thank you, Andrea. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel. Thank you for braving the weather today to be with us. A special welcome to our visitors today. Thank you for taking a chance to get to know us this way. If you have a candle somewhere nearby, you can jump right into our tradition of coming together with what we call lighting the flaming chalice, which takes place in our Unitarian Universalist congregations all over the world. If you don't have a candle handy, well, one thing we've learned this year is the power of imagination. So grab yourself a symbolic match, candle, cup, whatever it may be, while we sing together. Kevin?
Hi, I wasn't allowed to unmute myself. Here we are. The song is Soon the Day Will Arrive, hymn 146. Soon the day will arrive when we will be together and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have grieved, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and the promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and
Happy Valentine's Day. It is a strange one, to be sure, but let's not be strangers to the theme of love. In grade school, we would all decorate a little brown lunch bag with hearts and paper lace, write our own name on the bag, write out our Valentine's cards for one another, and place them in the bags that were lined up on the windowsill. It was an academic exercise in penmanship and an ethical lesson in inclusion, because we had to write a Valentine for everybody. So maybe that was trivial on some levels, bursting with hypocrisy on some levels if we hadn't recently been kind to some of our classmates or they to us. But also, it was a counterweight to some of the other messages we got in school, that some of us were more or less valuable, that some of us were more or less lovable. Our theme for today is the relationship, maybe the difference, the overlap, the discontinuity between being kind and being nice. and why analyzing it too closely is probably not what we need to do. What we need to do is to practice. Our theme for the month of February is beloved community. It's a highly idealistic theme in the midst of today's supercharged atmosphere of fear and division. And beloved community is an ideal that we cannot leave in the dust of triviality and hypocrisy. It's an ideal that starts by acknowledging the inherent worth and dignity of all people. And it takes on real meaning in practice. What comes in between the ideal of dignity and the real of practice? Awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of others. Sky has something to share with us today on that topic.
Good morning. My name is Sky Hedman. It is sweet to be your celebrant on this wintry Valentine's Day. All who come in the spirit of goodwill are welcome here. Whether you're a newcomer, a friend, or a member, whether you are snowed in or skied out, I hope you'll be warmed and invigorated by today's service. I am a migrant to this land, the traditional territory of the Lummi and the Nooksack people. Their presence is imbued in these mountains, valleys, waterways, and shorelines. May we nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and the shared responsibilities to their homelands where we reside today. As Paul said this morning, we look at niceness, kindness as part of the how of being a beloved community. Paul will light our chalice with you in the spirit of communication and compassion. Please join me as we recite our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant.
I skipped over something and went on. So Sky, you go ahead right now and do the children's story.
Well, this morning I'm sharing a very appropriate book, and it's called How Are You Peeling? And it's written by Saxton Freeman and Joost Elfers. And any minute now, we'll get that on the screen. There we go. So, well, how are you feeling? Happy, sad, feeling blue, feeling bad? Can a gentle, smiling friend try to cheer you up again? When you have to wait because someone is late, are you bored, jumpy, worried, or grumpy? Excited as the minutes pass? Now your friend is here at last. How are you when friends drop by? With someone new, a little shy? Don't belong? Not for long. Feel secure or not so sure? Amused, confused, frustrated, surprised? Try these feelings on for size. How are you feeling? When you're attacked, do you react? When you're angry, do you pout, whine, cry, scream, or shout? Feeling sorry and ashamed or embarrassed to be blamed? Jealous? Disappointed too? When you're hurt, who comforts you? So many smiles. Can you decide who's feeling safe? Who's feeling pride? Wired? Tired? Need a kiss? Do you know anyone like this? Do you let your feelings show? Who do you love? And how do they know? How are you feeling? The end.
So how are you peeling today? Let's take a moment together now to recognize the conscious or unconscious immensity of how we may be feeling. Immensity, perhaps even in the shape of absence. Let's breathe together. Slowly, deeply, steadily. If perhaps this is a time of less than our ordinary amount of doing, then it might be a time of more than usual feeling, which can be overwhelming, whether we're experiencing welcome or unwelcome feelings, if we have nowhere to go with them. So day after day, let's remember to take some time, maybe hour by hour, let's stop to acknowledge what is in our minds and hearts, to acknowledge so that we can let it all go. No clinging. Release the gratitude, release the angst, release the hope, release the fear. No clinging. Just opening our hearts, not closing down, letting the blood keep pumping, opening our hands. Our hands get sore or very cold if we refuse to stretch them open, or if we forget to stretch them. Let's actually do that right now. Stretch our hands. Stretch and release. Stretch and release. And then maybe that stretch will extend into our shoulders and our neck and our arm. Stretch and release of your hands, and you'll maybe notice that it extends into the back and the hips and the legs and the feet. Stretch and release the gratitude. Release the angst. Release the hope. Release the fear. No clinging. No cowering. Yes, experiencing. Yes, experiencing ourselves as channels of the divine, flowing through us, connecting us to one another, inescapably connecting us to the all, which is one. Many of us don't see enough familiar faces anymore. So it's nice to see you. And it's kind of you to be here today for one another. We would like to be present to one another in other ways, but it's not insignificant that we can gather in this way, to recall with one another the goodwill that we have for each other, the capacity that we have within ourselves to hold the sadness of others and to have our days brightened by each other's joys. I believe that this is a case for people we know and for those we don't know as well. We can feel and we can hold for one another. So visitors, thank you for being with us today. Getting to know one another can't always happen quickly in this format or any, but each day we can give and receive that jolt that comes when we begin again in love. I invite you now to type into the chat box any joys or sorrows or milestones that you'd like to share. To the extent possible, I will read these as they come through, so you may wish to just close your eyes and continue in the spirit of meditation and prayer for the well-being of each and all. Loving and being loved. Finding animal tracks in the snow. Remain in Mexico policy has ended. Moved into our new home this week. Happy birthday to my niece, Natalie. Concern for my cousin, who is having surgery for breast cancer this week. Neighbors and kids walking with sleds to the pasture. Valentine gifts and music at Buff yesterday. Mom was always my most favorite Valentine. Joyful family dogs in the snow. And of course, for all of the joys and sorrows that are hard to express, they're tender on our hearts, we don't know how to recognize them or let them out. Don't want to forget this one. For my mother who has entered hospice, and for my sisters, dad, and their families. A gift box of honey from an admirer. Gratitude for a healthy baby girl for my niece. 41 Valentine's days with my sweetie. Tristan, recuperating from COVID. We used to get a new book at our place on the breakfast table on Valentine's morning. Making Rice Krispie treats with grandchildren. And now I'd like to introduce Ellie Friedlob, who is going to share a moment of anti-racism with us.
Hi, this anti-racism minute comes on the shoulders of Valentine's Day. Countering racism and bias to build a beloved community here or anywhere must start from shared personal journeys built on each of our experiences, memories, and insights. In that spirit, I offer mine. My father was a Black man who, with my mother, left the United States in 1949, embittered by the racism that they encountered. He and my mother grew up in the South, college educated and prepared for rewarding careers. They saw that they could not live in the United States. In the journal that he kept of that time, I read of his literally turning his back on the Statue of Liberty as their ship left New York Harbor for Brazil, where he and my mom would be teachers. My sister Deborah and I were born there. We experienced life in a multicolored society where my parents were respected and Debbie and I thrived. In 1958, we returned to Chicago to live. You have all now heard about the talk that Black parents have primarily with their sons. The purpose is to make sure that your child or loved one has awareness of the many unwritten rules and signals in this unpredictably dangerous culture. This is to keep them safe on the most basic level. Oddly enough, however, the talk he and mom gave to Debbie and I was one of incredible optimism and idealism. We were told to dream big and focus on anything that we wanted to do. Perhaps it was the headiness of the civil rights movement that was starting to make strides and break barriers to education, careers, and life goals. Both were social workers who worked 2 jobs to buy their first home. Our extended family included my grandmother, who provided enormous support and security to my sister and I. She made it possible for my parents to work long hours, save to put my sister and I through college. As barriers to racism were being confronted and eliminated, they pushed us to become part of an emerging national beloved community. For the first years in my career, their encouragement and optimism were borne out. I made progress through advanced education, a career path in nursing, healthcare policy, and business. Then things got harder. I discovered something was missing from my parents' talk. I struggled with unfair pay compared to my peers, smaller or absent bonuses, missed expected promotions or plum assignments. I felt isolated and had fewer and fewer minorities around me. My sympathetic white friends bore silent witness, their will to act supportively diminished by their self-interest. Like my father 50 years earlier, I found corporate America was still not designed to easily redress grievances about any of its prerogatives. I engaged a labor attorney and was able to recover a small financial settlement. With that, the perceived promise of a beloved community around my career dissolved. It felt more like Lord of the Flies. All of us have the opportunity to receive or give some version of the talk for the safety and well-being of a loved one. The talk can also be self-talk, since we must also love and make ourselves aware and safe. While the content of the talk can range from cautioning on the very real possibility of physical threat, particularly for those of us of color, for my white brothers and sisters, the talk must also cover the responsibility to act on behalf of fairness and justice for others. Black, white, or brown, we must all be ready to take a stand to keep all of us safe. As the covenant states, to journey towards spiritual wholeness by our actions to dismantle oppression in ourselves and our institutions. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Yeah, talking about the talk that doesn't always help it happen with white children gives me a lot to think about as far as avoiding topics that might not feel nice and thinking about what would be most kind. It used to really irk me when my mom would use the phrase, "not too tight," if I was struggling to hold a lamb while she gave it an injection, or "not too deep" when I was planting potatoes. Or if I was salting an outrageously large pot of soup for our outrageously large family, she would say, "not too much now." Well, I'd be thinking to myself, obviously I shouldn't squeeze too hard or plant too deep or salt too much. But if it's supposed to be a teaspoon, say that. Or 8 teaspoons, whatever, just tell me. But what is too much, too many, too deep, too messy, too hot, too young, too slow? In a lot of those cases, there was no specific answer she could have given. There was a range of tightnesses to squeeze a lamb, such that it wouldn't get away, but it wouldn't get crushed either. But it couldn't be specified and it couldn't be measured. And salt could be measured, but, well, she might not know what's too much until it's too late. Especially if she was simultaneously doing laundry, delivering kittens, and cooling the huge bowl of homemade pudding in the snowbank while making sure we got to church on time. Besides, every lamb and every pot of soup was different. There were other cases, though, when she could have given me the answer. "Don't stay out too late now." Well, what's too late? Maybe she had a particular time in mind, or at least she could have come up with one. This sometimes really irked me, but I never told her how I felt. And asking for clarification, after many years of ambiguity, I probably gave up asking. Nor did I ask why she took that approach. Maybe she was deliberately trying to trap me. Or maybe she trusted me. Or she was liberating me to experience the natural consequences of my own decisions. Or she was thinking about something that was more important. Or maybe she didn't care. I don't think it was the latter. I was very fortunate in that regard. Her attitude was usually to expect me to figure it out for myself. Except in the case of dressing too casually for church, where there was a specific answer, even if it was subjective. And getting too cuddly with a girl, where there was a specific and easily quantifiable standard. Any is too much. Now, one could interpret these various mother-child interactions as kind or unkind, or too kind, or neither, or both. You could classify my responses as nice, or not nice, or too nice, or neither, or both. Is there such a phenomenon of too much kindness? Too much niceness? We could spend a lot of time arguing about what exactly those words mean, but that wouldn't do us much good. Any human quality that we talk about can probably be practiced, observed, or interpreted as helping others, hurting others, or neither, or both. Also, helping ourselves, hurting ourselves, or neither, or both, and every combination of these. Then, in addition to the effects of our actions, which we can't know anyway, we have to throw in our intentions. take every combination and salt it with good intentions, bad intentions, or neither, or both. I'm not going to go through every possible combination and tell you that 16 of them qualify as nice but not kind, and 11 of them are kind but not nice, and 8 are both, and 22 are neither. It would not be nice of me, nor kind, to put you through that. And besides, we have 2 engineers working as our Zoom hosts today, and they've probably already calculated that the numbers I just gave you are mathematically impossible. Fortunately, my mom, aggravating as she could be, was pretty nice. I think her general approach was to let me figure things out for myself and deal with the consequences. Maybe she was neither nice nor not nice. Maybe after raising my 8 older siblings, she was discouraged because nothing she said mattered anyway. Or maybe she had found that she could always trust in her children's good judgment. Or maybe by the time I came along, she was just tired. Unfortunately, I can't ask her anymore. Not that I would anyway, though, because my mom was too nice to talk about feelings, especially negative feelings. She was too nice to my father, who was a nice guy and kind, but also mean and thoughtless. I saw a cartoon once that showed a car passing a sign on the highway. It said, "You are leaving Minnesota. Be nice." As long as you were in Minnesota, everyone knew that nice was the norm. Nice was pleasant. And sometimes nice could be passive. Nice was generous. And those who practiced niceness were sometimes taken advantage of. So, nice was often criticized as too generous. Nice was seen as a vice when it enabled people to be irresponsible or aggressive. And then, because it was virtuous to avoid being too generous, one could argue that sometimes the nicest thing to do is to be mean, cruel, to be kind. Sometimes with genuinely good intentions and sometimes not. I learned to err on the side of never raising an issue that might make someone uncomfortable. Never burden anyone else with my own discomfort. Always be nice. Don't speak the hard truths if you can avoid it. There's a picture book that I thought of sharing today called The Honest to Goodness Truth. Its message, however, is at the opposite end of the continuum from being too nice. What I've talked about so far is don't be truthful. The message of honest to goodness truth is don't be truthful if it's unnecessarily unkind, instead of don't be nice in such a way that it's untruthful. Anyway, the book goes like this. It's called The Honest to Goodness Truth. A mother tells her little girl that she must always be honest. So the kid is walking along outside, and an old neighborhood lady calls out and says, "Come see my garden, I want to show you." And when she does, Ruthie Mae makes a point of pointing out all the weeds. And then she spends the rest of the day being brutally honest with friends and strangers and making a lot of enemies. And she goes home to her mom and says, "I don't know why everyone's so mad at me." So Mama explained that there's the truth and what Mama calls the honest to goodness truth, which I find similar to something that I read elsewhere, which is this: say only what is true, kind, and necessary, or at least 2 out of the 3. My original title for the service today was something like loving versus lying instead of kind versus nice. I thought of the word lying because too nice, not saying what is true, can be a little bit like lying. Or saying something that is blatantly untrue, like, I'm fine, is a lot like lying, but it's not always the wrong thing to say. That's why I like say what is true, kind, and necessary, or at least 2 out of the 3. Let's take another moment to breathe while Lisa Cusick sings for us. This video was recorded outside yesterday in the snow in front of Buff. Lisa sang Las Mananitas, which is a traditional Mexican birthday song of love. While she's singing, feel free to post in the chat the most recent kindness that you've received.
Awaken, my love, awaken, and see that the day has dawned, that the little birds are singing, that the moon has long gone. Despierta, mi bien, despierta, mira que amaneció, ya los pajarillos cantan, la luna ya se metió. Estas son las mañanitas que cantaba Rey David, ya que hoy es un día de amor, te las cantamos así. Despierta, mi bien, despierta, mira que amaneció, ya los pajarillos cantan, la luna ya se metió. Si el sereno de la esquina me quisiera hacer favor de apagar su linternita mientras que pasa mi amor. Despierta, mi bien, despierta, mira que amaneció, ya los pajarillos cantan, la luna ya se metió. Ahora sí, señor sereno, le agradezco su favor. Prenda ya su linternita que ya ha pasado mi amor. Despierta, mi bien, despierta, mira que amaneció. Ya los pajarillos cantan, la luna ya se metió. Everyone! Despierta, mi bien, despierta, mira que amaneció. Ya los pajarillos cantan, la luna ya se metió.
Ole, ole.
I loved how the bubbles and the snowflakes blended together, and as people were singing yesterday. The Dalai Lama says that his religion is that of kindness. There is no more important practice. This is his very sincere way to affirm the value, he says, of Islam, even though he is not a Muslim, and Christianity, although he is not technically a Christian, and Hinduism, though he is not a Hindu, and on, affirming the faith of those who worship a supernatural God or gods, even though he does not, affirming those whose only religious affiliation or spiritual practice is kindness. Kindness, he says, is enough. Here's another bit of Dalai Lama wisdom. Be kind whenever possible. It's always possible. And be kinder than is necessary. I've also read the following, probably erroneously put into his name, but a reasonable extrapolation. The idea that the word kind is derived from the same root as the word kin. So we practice the religion of kindness because we are all of one kind. As kin, we are all beloved community. We are all potentially joined by kindness. Whether it comes in the form of gentleness or in the form of speaking truth to power with grace and love, kindness enlarges us. When we widen our circle of kinship, we become more kind. When we are more kind, we widen the circle of kinship. Which comes first? Doesn't matter. When our kindness does not result in our being recognized and appreciated, kindness still enlarges us. Kindness does not expect payback. Kindness, a form of generosity, is liberating because we become what we do. Kindness begets kindness. So if we are noticed for our kindness and this inspires others, so much the better. If we are not noticed for our kindness and we feel resentful, so much the worse. If kindness makes us feel superior, well, let's not argue over the semantics of whether it counts as kindness or not. Let's just not practice feeling superior. Is it more kind to give someone a fish or to teach them to fish? Let's not argue over the semantics. Let's make sure that they have access to the lake, that all have equal access. And in the meantime, make sure they don't die. Being kind, we can be assertive and set limits. Or when it's safe to do so, we can let down our guard, be vulnerable. Being kind, we can demand that the truth be told. We can insist that there be consequences when harm is done. We can mourn when society does not learn from its mistakes. We can be upset. It is not unkind to ourselves or to others to be upset, to feel intensely the pain of others, and to protest injustice. As long as we don't cling to our righteousness and find ourselves aggressive rather than assertive, and find ourselves defensive instead of open-hearted, and find ourselves bitter, expecting life to be fair. Clinging to those expectations is an unkindness to ourselves because it can prevent our generosity and kindness to others and its liberating effects. We don't need to exactly agree what these different words mean. We don't need to be told what constitutes too much or too little good intentions, what is kind in word or deed. We have an innate sense, and we learn from our mistakes, and we begin again in love and kindness. And now I'd like to introduce Emily O'Connor, who is the Executive Director of Lydia Place. Emily is going to tell us about the vital work that that organization is doing. And then we're going to have a time where we can contribute to Lydia Place in any of three ways. You can send a check to Buff and make the check payable to Buff, but in the memo line, say special collection or Lydia Place, and then all of those funds will be forwarded. You can also use the phone app called Give Plus, the word give with a plus sign, and there will be a designation there where you can designate to a special collection. And you can also go to buff.org, and in the upper right-hand corner where it says donate, click, and you can use PayPal or Visa or MasterCard. So thank you, Emily, for being here, and let me urge all of you to be as generous as you possibly can.
Thank you so much for having me. I have had the privilege of serving as executive director of Lydia Place for 9 years now. And in each one of those years, it has been such a pleasure to join you all on one of any days throughout the year. And I was so curious to see how this would feel, because every time I am with you in your beautiful building downtown, I end up in tears. And it turns out that even through Zoom, the experience is the same. And I am so moved and filled with love and inspiration and hope by the space that you create with each other each week. And I want to say thank you to you, Reverend Paul, but also to you, Sky, for your beautiful opening and reminding us whose land we are on. Ellie, for your beautiful words about racism and those hard conversations we all need to have with each other. I think this is thinking about, as you said, Paul, speaking the hard truth. That is the way that we need to move forward. And for those of us in the community who have the privilege of enjoying spaces like this, where we can work on being our very best versions of ourselves for each other and for our neighbors, this, I believe, is the path forward. Lydia Place has been working with homeless families for over 30 years in our community. And I know that every year I come and say, I don't have to tell you what a problem homelessness is, because you can see it. And this year, somehow it's extra tangible. And we have had some very intense moments in our community that have brought this issue into the forefront of the conversation. One of the things that has been a struggle in watching this conversation unfold locally in the past few months is that it seems to me that we are still missing part of the conversation, which is to ask ourselves, not just how do we rescue the humans who are in front of us in tents at this moment, but how do we learn how it is that we got to the place where we have so many humans on the lawns and around our roadways and our sidewalks and our parks. And it seems that we're missing that piece of the conversation. And if we were able to sort of back up a second and ask those hard questions, we would have to take a hard look in the mirror and say, this is part of how our systems are set up. We are currently doing having the same mistakes that we've always had. And while we are all eyes focused on Camp 210 and other aspects of the visible homelessness, there is the next generation of Camp 210 occupants in tiny little bodies in locations around our community who aren't getting their needs met. And what we know is that childhood trauma is significantly correlated with homelessness as an adult. And all of these things that you've been talking about here this morning, racism and kindness and compassion and generosity and thoughtfulness and assertiveness and hard conversations, this is the way that we figure out how to change that so that everybody can be enjoying spaces like this where we work on self-fulfillment and honesty and self-care. And that has got to start by us first being able to take care of each other. I don't know about you, but I love the snow. And I have 3 children here who have been locked in a room so that they don't make any noise for 4 minutes. And it has been such a pleasure for me to watch them play this last 24 hours in the beautiful snow. But at the same time, my heart is so heavy because I'm thinking about the consequences for our unhoused neighbors and the children who don't have the opportunity to be filled with joy as mine do today. What I want is I want to be able to enjoy this beautiful snow without this pain resting on my heart and the hearts of all of us as we worry about who we might lose in the next snowstorm. Lydia Place, we provide housing, we provide a parenting program and mental health services. And I often skip the part where I'm supposed to actually talk about Lydia Place and the services that we provide because I care more about what it is we're trying to accomplish. And that is summed up in our mission, which is to disrupt the cycle of homelessness for current and future generations. And that means really taking a hard look at how we not just put a roof over somebody's head, but how we create an equitable society where everyone has what they need, where all children are loved and protected from before they are born, so that we don't have to spend so much time as a community building bigger jails and bigger shelters. I want to thank you all for year after year opening your hearts, being willing to have hard conversations, and for helping make it possible for Lydia Place to continue to respond to, we serve about 250 families every year. And it's not enough, but it is so critically important for every child whose life we're able to touch. So thank you so much for making those small moments possible, for showing up here today, even in Zoom format, for inviting me into your beautiful space, and for carrying these conversations forward for us as a community. We are so grateful for each and every one of you and the love and compassion that you send out into this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you for that offertory, Andrea, by Chopin. And thank you to Emily and telling us about Lydia Place. As I drive around town, I feel helpless and hopeless sometimes to see people living out in this weather. And I know that a lot of people at Buff are already involved in very real ways helping out, but I appreciate it that you have made a financial donation today. Thank you very much for responding to Emily's plea and for your donation to Lydia Place. And now we are going to finish with the song 407 in the Gray Hymn Book. We're going to sit at the welcome table. We're going to sit at the welcome table. We're going to sit at the welcome table one of these days. Hallelujah. We're going to sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. All kinds of people at the welcome table. All kinds of people around that table one of these days. Hallelujah. All kinds of people around that table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. No fancy style at the welcome table. No fancy style around that table one of these days. Hallelujah. No fancy style at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days.
Thank you, Kevin. That is so aspirational. Just like the opening song we did today, Soon the Day Will Arrive. It's so aspirational. Either one of these songs can be sung with enthusiastic hope. They can be sung with reflective seriousness. We need to do all of this. Thank you for being a community that wrestles with the joys and the sorrows, the gratitude, the generosity, the demands of what it takes to stay alive and what it takes to keep each other alive. Thank you for all you do to live into the principles and the mission that we affirm and promote. You can learn more about what Buff does and how to get connected with our activities, which are still going on Zoom via our website, buff.org, where you can also find our newsletter, the Midweek Update, or sign up for it so that you get an email each Wednesday to remind you that it's there. You can also go to buff.org to find today's order of service. And even though it's a little bit late for that, at the bottom of the order of service is some additional announcements. And then you'll know how to find the order of service for next week too. Let's see, after the service today, please stay with us for a happy hour, a serious hour, a time of connecting to one another. We'll be broken up into groups of 6 to 10 people where we can check in on each other, maybe reflect on the theme of today's service. I also want you to know that if you're new, you can get a hold of me anytime by writing me, minister@buff.org or paul@buff.org. And one last activity I want you to know about is going to be shared now by Alan Friedland.
Thanks, Paul. I don't know about you, but this has been a special service, and I feel all warm and just very good right now. And I want to share with you something that you can do in the spirit of this special day. In 2020, the UUA Commission on Institutional Change completed 3 years of work analyzing structural racism, the workings of power, and white supremacy within the UUA. The results of this inquiry are found in the Commission's report, Widening the Circle of Concern report of the UUA Commission on Institutional Change. Within its pages are chapters on theology, congregations and communities, hospitality and inclusion, living our values in the world, educating for liberation, and innovations in risk-taking, among others. The Commission offers recommendations and actions to help us live into the change we want to see in the world and in ourselves. And so at Buff, beginning in March, you can join a team led by Jeannia Allen Schmid and the Reverends Mel Hoover and Rose Eddington to assess our fellowship's progress toward building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. Using the widening the circle of concern UUA report as our framework, we will embark on an 11-week journey about who we are now and the actions and changes we need to make in order to accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and at Buff. Jeannia has placed links to the report and the workbook we will use in the midweek update. If you are interested in learning more, please contact Jeannia at jeannia@buff.org.
Thanks, Alan. Another really simple description of religion. I love the Dalai Lama's just be kind, pretty simple. I also like Theodore Parker's from the early 1800s. He talked of Unitarianism, but I think it can apply to however we understand our place in the universe. He said, "Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith divine living." And after we sing Circle Round together, one more beautiful song from our Snow Valentine's Festival yesterday from Beth Fuller. Let's sing together now, Circle Round.
Let the time